last few months, I have been struggling with something. But I really couldn't put my finger on exactly what it was that was causing me to just feel totally uncomfortable with myself. And then, about 2 weeks ago, I was taking a walk, and I was praying. I was praying for friends of mine, I was praying for family, I was praying for the church, and I began to have a conversation with God. I began to, through this conversation, realize that the center of what I was struggling with was actually disappointment. You see, I was having this conversation with God because there were people that I loved and cared for. There were people who I treasured them in my life, and I treasured their presence here in Simply Grace, and I knew that they were going through some really tough times. There were expectations that I had for various things in my life, and they were not living up to these expectations. I was disappointed that God didn't seem to be there fixing things and organizing things in the way that I so believed He should. I felt like I was doing my part. I was praying. I was being faithful. I felt like I was doing His work, and yet what I was expecting was falling short. I was feeling like my denomination was struggling and that wasn't living up to my expectations. That our nation and all its messy politics, that wasn't living up to my expectations. And in the midst of this, I realized I was becoming disillusioned by how God seemed to be handling things. Too many good people were facing illnesses. They were encountering unexpected deaths, and just a whole slew of other challenging parts of their lives. Good and faithful Christians. And I was disappointed. I began to think about the fact that I needed to look at what was behind this disappointment, because this road to disillusionment was not going to be a healthy one. I looked up the word disappointment, and if you take it apart, there's the dis part and then the appointment part. And the dis means to separate. Now, when our daughter was a teenager, that was a big thing to say, "Oh, you dissed me." Until this moment, literally, I never got that. And now I get it. You separated yourself from the person. Therefore, a disappointment means that something that you planned for, something you expected, didn't happen. You're separated from that. And disappointment can be a feeling of dissatisfaction, but it can go all the way to the point of deep anguish. The fact that we feel like we are being torn apart from what we expected as the outcome. Have you ever been there? Have you ever expected something and the outcome did not come the way you expected? And there's this brokenness, this sorrow, this sadness. Disappointments are a part of life. It would be nice that the greatest disappointments in our life were that people put almonds in Hershey Kisses. But you know, it gets tough. You know, we have dreams. We set goals. We have plans. And when they don't work out the way we expect, it can be very frustrating. Life is a blend of celebrations and disappointments. What we have to be careful with is that our disappointments in life don't eventually eat away at our hearts. It's important for us to learn how to manage disappointments. And there are all kinds of different disappointments. Disappointments with ourselves, disappointments with others, disappointments with groups and denominations and churches and politics in our nation and et cetera, But today what I'd like to talk about specifically is disappointment with God. You see, we try so hard to do the right things. We work hard, but it doesn't seem to be making any progress. We show up at thankless jobs each and every day, giving our all, and it seems that our boss is never satisfied. Or we parent the very best that we know how, and our child rebels. And we never seem to be able to get ahead. That paycheck is completely spent before the moment that we get it. One way to think about disappointment is that it is an interruption in our expectations. And it happens because of someone else's choice or an act of nature. We invest all of ourselves in something, but sometimes we fail. When these kinds of disappointments in life come about, I don't know about you, but for me, I begin to really question God. And sometimes my prayers might seem irreverent, but I think it's just a part of my desperation. Is it really too much to ask, Lord, that you make the lives of the people who show up on Sunday morning a little bit better? And yet it seems that that's not the way things turn out. Is it really too much to expect that things could just go right? Disappointment can become a crisis in trust. Trust in ourselves, trust in others, and trust in God. Have you ever found yourself disappointed with God? That you've prayed and you've prayed and you've prayed, and seemingly still nothing seems to change. It seems that God wanted us to do something. He set up everything so that we were in this place, and yet nothing but obstacles seem to be in our path. Today I want you to know that it's not wrong to wonder, where is God? Where is God in the troubles and the disappointments of our lives? When our beautiful child is sick, when our beloved partner dies, when our prized relationships crumble, when our dream job has disappeared, when so much of what we value and dream about and vision and think about is gone. These and a number of other things that are disappointments in life, it is okay to question God's presence. Why do I say that it's okay? Because I know that I'm not alone in my disappointment. That the Bible is chock-filled with people who are disappointed. Think of the years of disappointment of Sarah and Rebecca and Rachel and Hannah and Elizabeth. Month after month, year after year, waiting to have a child. And yet, each month, find themselves childless? Or how about Job and Joseph and even Moses, who are faithful servants of God, and yet their lives are turned upside down? And then there are the prophets, Jeremiah, Elijah, that in the moments that they should have their greatest victory, it seems in the next breath, they're running for their lives. And then that's just the Old Testament. How about the New Testament? How about the disciples? Men chosen by God, by Jesus himself, chosen to give up 3 years of their lives to walk alongside Jesus, to learn his ways. And then in the end, instead of this great, wonderful kingdom, instead of the nation being able, Israel being raised up above the powers of Rome, instead, their beloved leader is crucified. And we find them hiding in fear. Talk about disappointment, right? Usually when we face disappointment in life, there are a couple ways that we can end up. The two today I thought about were we could grow bitter. And the second thing is that we can try to fix things ourselves. Disappointment that leads to bitterness is the kind of disappointment that Judas had. Judas could not let go of his disappointment of the fact that Jesus did not seem to be living up to his expectations. And that bitterness consumed him. We've talked about bitterness before and how it can just take over your life. And deep disappointment can do that. For me, I know that my fallback for disappointment is self-reliant behavior. When I am disappointment, then I move into I will fix this mode. I move into action because rather than waiting on God and seeing what God is going to do, what happens is I find disappointment as a threat to my ability to do things. And so therefore, I'm going to raised above it. When our disappointment threatens our identity and self-worth, it's easy for us to just go off on a tangent on our own. It's easy because what happens is that we decide that we can fix it instead of waiting to see what God has in store. It happens in the Bible. We know that for Moses is deeply disappointed and angered at the treatment of the Israelites by the Egyptians. What does he go and do? He goes and he kills the Egyptian officer. And that just hijacks the whole plan, and he's running off to the desert and hiding for a bunch of years, right? Many times in disappointment, it is in the fact that we need to wait. That there is likely a hidden treasure. However, we need to be able to wait until it is uncovered. So what do we do as we sit in our disappointment? Spoiler alert, I will not tell you how to fix your disappointment today. So if you want to turn it off right now, you can, because I don't have the answers. But I do have some suggestions for how we wait and how I am waiting in my disappointment. We need to allow ourselves to mourn our disappointment, to not just brush it aside and say it's no big deal, To not push it down and pretend that everything is okay, but to acknowledge that whatever is disappointing to us, that it mattered to us, and to acknowledge that broken dream, that broken expectation, and to grieve that loss. When we're disappointed, it is very easy for us to kind of be like turtles and kind of curl up into our own shells. But this is the time when it's really important for us to remain connected with people. The temptation is to withdraw, but I am going to say to you loud and clear, don't. This is the time that you must continue to build and work on your friendships, because God often ministers to our hurts through other people. Sometimes I'll say something and, oh, God led me or God said to me, and somebody will say, well, how did that happen? And I said, it came through the words or the actions of another believer that I came to know that God desires that for me. And when we separate ourselves from friends, from our church, from our community, then we can't hear the words that God has for us. It can be tempting to put up walls when we're feeling especially vulnerable, but if you shut yourself out, shut yourself off from friends and off from church and community, then you're shutting yourself off from a venue of hope and healing. I am sure this season of disappointment that I am struggling with will not be the last time, but I have remained in prayerful conversation with God about this. I've remained in conversation with friends. And there have been times when I have been overwhelmed. And what happens is God puts someone in my path with a word of hope and a word of direction. And in that way, I've come to believe that God has offered me an opportunity to journey through the hard times. To not wonder, God, why did you allow bad things to happen to people that I love, but instead to hear his voice say, I am giving you the opportunity to journey with people going through hard times, not as a punishment, but instead as a venue of hope. I've given you the heart to care for people in their tough times, and to know that I am there first and foremost for them. It is really hard when we are disappointed not to give up on our faith. But I tell you that it gives you the opportunity to step back and to say, what are the things that I've just been going through but not thinking about? Have I forgotten to really pray, God, in the way that has intentionality? Have I forgotten to listen to your words that you speak to us through your gospel? While we are wrestling with a particular area in our life, I know for me, I am a person who can easily become fixated on one thought. And so if my thought is just on this one problem, I miss all the blessings that God has surrounded me with in the midst of that problem. While I am lamenting in one area, possibly God is opening up something new. While I am feeling lost and abandoned, possibly it is the moment in which God wants me to be the very closest to Him, because that is the moment that He is not going to let me go. Admitting your disappointment into God will not destroy your faith. Instead, I believe that it often strengthens my faith. Rather than pretend that I can just believe through the whole thing, it is a season in which I can share openly and honestly with God, with friends, and even with my congregation, that my faith may be weak, but I know that God is infinitely stronger. But I only know that because of the seasons that I've gone through in the past, and I've seen His presence. I only know that because I can see you sitting here on this morning, even though I know all of the grave disappointments that you too have faced in your life. Theologian Thomas Merton said, God will never leave us to face perils on our own. And I believe that. I believe that God is always with us. When your heart is broken, that is the moment in which we are best to hand God the broken pieces. There are many reasons for disappointments in life. And when we understand that in the disappointments, they are the moments in which we can learn life's lessons, then we can use those disappointments to draw closer to God. In some cases, the disappointment of today can lead to unimagined blessings in the future. For Stephen and I, we waited many, many years to have a child. And we went through a lot of disappointments, like Sarah and Elizabeth and Rachel and Rebecca, mourning each month that we didn't have a child that we believed that God wanted us to have. And the blessing was that when the time was right, God gave us our gift from God, Nathaniel. But there are other things. My mother's dementia, that she doesn't know us, and that she's laid in a bed for years. That she's comfortable, yes. I at one time questioned because I was so disappointed. God, she loves you so much, and she knows the gifts of heaven. Why wouldn't you just take her to heaven with you? But I've come to let go of that disappointment and understand that on this side of heaven, I will never understand the why. But I will lean on my faith rather than pull away and receive comfort in my pain and anguish. Because God is good and trustworthy. I don't need to fix things. I don't need to rescue you, myself, or anyone else. Instead, we need to allow our hearts to rest securely in the embrace of God. And so I ask you this morning, are there disappointments that have shaken your faith? Maybe, like me, it's not just one big disappointment, but instead an accumulation of a number of little ones. Have you been tempted to quit? Have you been reluctant to pray? This morning, I'd like to give you the opportunity to lift up your disappointment in prayer. And I want you to know that if you do not have the strength to pray on your own, then let your friends bring your request to God. And so what we're going to do is just have a time of quietness. I'll be up front to help you pray if you want to pray. If you want to just grab the hand of a friend somewhere here and pray with them, you're more than welcome to do that. And just in the quietness, let us bring our request to God.